We've got Hub Media with Lori from Purposely Unplugged. It's our, July show already. This year's flying by. How are you, Lori?
Wonderful. How are you? Canada Day is coming. What wonderful
Or,
celebrations in all of our towns.
yeah, Canada Day is just around the corner. A couple of things I want to chat with you about. We did a show last month. We started down sort of defining intimacy. And we got lots of feedback on that, which was really cool. I'm glad that folks are having that conversation. But I wanted to step back a little bit and get your thought process on this, because one of the conversations I had was, well, I don't want to talk from someone who watched it. I don't want to talk about intimacy. And I said, well, again, repeating myself, we're trying to define it. But what I found was there's this huge fear to talk about it. And I want to sort of address that fear, because I think before we can have the conversation, we need to understand why we're carrying this with us, right? This fear. So let's start there. What is the fear about having an intimate conversation?
Well, the fear could be grounded in lots of things, Dave, but when you think about it, it's vulnerability. It's that honesty piece. And if it's been something that you've never been able to talk about in your life, then absolutely at a therapeutic point, it would be difficult as well. And I think that was my exact message, Dave, that this is a safe place. If you look at my website, it's one of the things I actually kind of gently talk about on the website, that any conversation is safe and that's okay. And we can begin that conversation here. But it's never forced. I mean,
No.
honestly, it's this therapeutic relationship where if something comes up, we explore it. If it's not comfortable, we don't talk about it. So, vulnerability, I think, is really there. Yes, fear. Yes, vulnerability. And maybe there's a piece too of just knowledge and not feeling comfortable with knowledge base, and that could be pretty deeply rooted too, which is why we always bring this back. We start with family of origin.
Right.
What did this look like for you originally? In your formative years, 10, 12, 14, when we're exploring individuation as kids, what did this look like for you? And then now today, what does this mean for you?
It's interesting too. And I want to, because going back to family of origin, the context there, the other part of that is, if for generations in your family, it's something that's never talked about, you don't even know where to begin, do you? Right. You could have the fear, not understanding the fear, but not even being able to say, I'd like to have this conversation, but you have no grounds to even understand what it is. Is that true?
Absolutely. It could be around safety too. Because if we don't have safety in talking about other things in our life, then this is definitely a topic we don't feel safe talking about. So, from an intergenerational perspective, absolutely. Because, like we said last week, times have changed, life has changed, information has changed, what we know as a society has changed. So, what your grandparents and parents know may not even be the same information that you have access to. That might feel a bit odd as well.
Well, and I think when you think about it, and I think if you're a person who wants to have that conversation, and again, I'm asking because I don't understand, is should I write all that stuff down that bothers me about it? Like, should you make that little notebook to yourself to understand it better? Or like we do on the show, just ask the questions, right? To sort of say, hey, why are people this way? Or what makes them go, turn away from this conversation?
Hmm. You can have a notebook. I mean, that sounds almost a little bit like journaling, right? Which
Right.
is,
Yeah.
from a mindful perspective, a really good place to start. I know whenever I say the word journaling, people think, copious pieces of notes. It's not what that really is
No.
anymore. Journaling can just be doodling and capturing individual words and really capturing emotion. So, from a writing it down perspective, yes, journaling makes a lot of sense. But then maybe it's just knowing where the people are in the community that are safe pockets where you can have these conversations before you even take the conversations back to some family members. And maybe you never take these conversations back to family members. That's okay too, which is the role that I and other community workers hold around safety and information.
With that conversation about intimacy, is that something we all need to address as a society? Like, I mean, as individuals, we do, obviously. But when it rolls out that way, are you kind of looking at it from the perspective of, this is a conversation, no matter what your life's like, you probably need to have this conversation with yourself first, I guess, but to understand it? Because I think that's the other part. When we started down this road, I had no clue. Like, I honestly, you and I talked about what it means. So I think you have to define it Is it defined differently to everyone, or is it the same path? I guess is my question. Sorry.
Well, we kind of addressed that a little bit. Like, you have to have that emotional closeness, the support through
Right.
thoughts, feelings, connection, experiences. You should have that with someone before there's any other level of physical intimacy. But again, this means something different to everyone. And really, that's where the conversation begins. What does it mean to you? What does this look like to you? Where are you at today? Where do you want to be 6 months from now? Where do you want to be a year from now? Is there information or are there conversations that can help you get there?
If you're in a relationship before, let's start there. Let's say, Bob had a first wife. Now he's on to a second wife, but he never addressed the intimacy issues with his first wife. Is there that carryover a lot of times? Because it seems like that's part of it. People don't address the issue when it's in front of them, and then it stagnates and starts over again.
There might be carryover, but there might not, because in a new relationship, you establish new
Right.
boundaries, new safety. It's an entirely different person. So you can be intimate, meaning emotional, supportive thoughts, feeling, experiences in a different way. So there might be carryover. Sometimes that works itself out, and there's just this new platform, this new framework.
Okay.
Um, so that's really not an easy answer. It depends on the two people and what this looks like for them, which is where, when I'm with a client alone, what does your part of this look like in your relationship with whomever that is? And then what would shift that for you so you feel like you have better success with that? That's if I'm working with someone individually. If I'm working with a couple together, then absolutely I go right to the Tammy Nelson work, and we work through that together.
This is an off question because I think it's something I just realized I've been doing. I'm always addressing it from a guy's perspective, not from a woman's perspective. Do women struggle just as much with intimacy?
Absolutely. We all struggle with it, and
Right.
most of us don't talk about it.
Right. Well,
So
that's what I
that's
mean. I was like, wait a minute. I never even thought about, I'm looking at it from my perspective, but there's folks that are struggling, maybe women, transgender, like it's not just that. So from all those other perspectives, what are you seeing? Like, is it the same issue all the way around?
Oh, it's never the same issue. I mean, every individual, every couple, it's never the same. And that's
Okay.
okay. That's part of this conversation and this journey. And yes, I'm glad you just said it that way, because it's not just hetero couples as well. It could be any combination of any identity and any kind of relationship. And that's okay. And that's where I just need folks to know that it's okay to talk about these things, and that starting with a conversation in this environment is a good place to start.
With your animal therapy, does it apply with intimacy? Like when you're talking with the cows, I mean, when you're working with folks that want to work with the animals, is that sort of creating a bond?
It's a bond from an emotional perspective.
Right.
Absolutely. I see what you mean. Yeah. So
But it
definitely.
opens the perspective, right, to have that conversation all of a sudden.
Yeah. Well, and
Okay.
people soften, right? I mean, Grace is a pug. So when
Yeah.
she
So,
comes up and starts cuddling, I mean, people just soften. So absolutely. And definitely with Hope as well, when people are in with Hope and her interaction, it's a gentleness. I mean, we
yeah.
need to think about our own bodies, where our own stress level is before we interact with an animal. So, definitely from a connection perspective, yes, that is definitely there when you look at animal assisted therapy in any way that you look at that.
And I was trying to get to that point. It sounded like a really awkward question there for a second, but I was trying to get to the point that, you know, you got to break down the barriers, right? In order to talk about intimacy. So if the animal therapy is helping you break down barriers to get that start, that's something else that folks need to be aware of that you're capable of doing to help them with. There's
Yeah.
a long way to go for that answer. Sorry about that.
That's okay. But even with animals, it's that sense of touch, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
way you touch Hope, the way you touch Grace, the way that, so just even that sense of touch softens it a little bit, just to kind of bring us to those conversations as we need to. Plus, I'm outside, Dave. I mean,
Yeah.
so
That's the great part.
as much as possible, I try to be outside. So when that happens, I mean, it's just a natural conversation for some people when it's right for them. I mean, that's really the point of this,
Yeah.
that letting people know that if these topics are ones that you need to bring up with someone, that these conversations are safe and these conversations can happen.
on a scale of 1 to 10, is intimacy right up there with problems? Like, is it sort of right near the top usually of what you're sort of people are dealing with?
Well, from a couple's perspective, absolutely. So,
Okay.
finances, intimacy are like top concerns for couples generally. With individuals, we always do individual work first. So, like lots of times, that's work stress or just trauma from the past. We always work through those things first, move the major targets, and then sometimes, okay, now where we're at, things change for people. So, what does this look like now for you?
Wow. We packed a lot in those 10 minutes all of a sudden. But I think that was important because I think we need to sort of understood where we're going with this conversation before we can move on with it. So, any last plugs? How do people get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Phone is always best, 226-934-7425. Text is excellent. I always respond to that. I try not to be on the computer as much as possible, but Lori at purposefullyunplugged.com. And the website will be changing again soon. I'm still in the process of that, so those changes will be coming. That's the best way, really, to reach out. And I realized our captions last month, some of the words didn't exactly come out correctly. So as we do the captioning, it's just
Oh, I see what you're saying with the
yeah,
text.
purposefullyunplugged.com for
Yeah.
sure.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for this and have a great day. And we'll chat next month.
Perfect. Take care.